You ever wake up one morning, walk out to your front yard with a cup of coffee, and wonder why your grass looks like it's been in a rainforest? That was me 3 weeks ago. The ground was soaked, puddles everywhere, and the hose was slightly warm like it had been used recently. Now I live alone. I don't have kids, roommates, or garden gnomes who sneak water for their underground villages. Just me, my coffee, and apparently a lawn that waters itself. At first, I thought maybe the automatic sprinkler timer was glitching. But then I remembered I don't even have sprinklers. Just one hose. And that's when I started to notice other strange things. The water bill had jumped. Not a little. It had spiked like I was filling a swimming pool every night. But I wasn't. The only thing in my backyard was a dying tomato plant and my rusty barbecue grill. So where was the water going? I started asking around. My neighbors were all friendly enough, except for one. Karen. And yeah, her name really was Karen. She had just moved in a couple months ago and immediately started acting like the queen of the street. She wasn't the HOA president, but you wouldn't know that from the way she walked around with her clipboard, inspecting people's lawns like she was the gatekeeper of paradise. She'd filed complaints about the shade of green on another neighbor's shutters, demanded someone cut their grass shorter, and even told the mailman he parked too aggressively in front of her mailbox. The woman was a menace. But still, I didn't think she'd stoop to theft. Until I saw it. It was a Saturday. I had just gotten back from the grocery store, and as I pulled into my driveway, I caught her red-handed. There she was, in her floral blouse and enormous sun hat, dragging my hose across my yard like it was hers. She hooked it to a portable pressure washer and started cleaning her front porch. No shame. No permission. No asking. Just out there, stealing my water in broad daylight like she paid the bill. I sat in my car watching, dumbfounded. She looked up, waved at me like we were best friends, and shouted, "Hope you don't mind. Just a quick rinse." I didn't even get a chance to say anything. She turned her back and kept spraying. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, trying to decide between confronting her or just pretending I didn't see anything. I chose the latter, went inside, and stared at my faucet like it had betrayed me. Later that day, I knocked on her door. Politely. I asked if she needed help with her water line or something. She laughed and said, "Oh no. I just like your hose better. The water pressure is amazing. I figured it's all community property anyway, right?" Community property. I nearly choked. Last time I checked, my house wasn't a commune, and the water wasn't coming from the rain gods. It was on my tab. I told her, gently but firmly, that I didn't appreciate her using my hose without asking. She smiled, tilted her head and said, "Well, I'm sure the HOA won't mind. We're all supposed to share and be neighborly." Then she closed the door. Just like that. Conversation over. Now, here's the thing about me. I'm not confrontational. I don't yell. I don't escalate. I solve problems. So, I decided to go through the proper channels. I emailed the HOA with pictures. I explained the situation, attached my water bill, and asked for clarification on this so-called community property policy. A few days later, I got a response. It said, and I quote, "Thank you for your concern. At this time, we encourage all neighbors to resolve minor disputes amicably without HOA intervention." That's HOA speak for. Figure it out yourself. So I tried again. I bought a lock for the hose. Simple enough. Karen couldn't use what she couldn't access. Problem solved, right? Wrong. The next morning, the lock was gone. Not unlocked. Gone. Clean cut through. Someone had used bolt cutters on my hose lock. I stood there staring at the sliced metal like I was in a crime scene. I even looked for fingerprints, not that I'd know what to do with them. But in my gut, I knew exactly who had done it. And sure enough, across the street, Karen was out there again, using the hose. Washing her SUV like she was in a car commercial. Water flying everywhere like it was free. Like it wasn't coming out of my wallet. I confronted her again. This time, a little less friendly. I asked about the lock. she said. Oh, that thing? It was a safety hazard. Someone could trip. I took care of it. Then she smiled, flipped her hair, and went back to scrubbing her tires. I couldn't believe it. I walked back inside, sat down, and stared at the wall for 10 minutes straight. The HOA wouldn't help. Karen was untouchable, and I was now financing her spa treatments for her house and car. That's when I got the idea to install a camera. Not a big one, just a tiny motion-activated security cam, tucked under the gutter near the spigot. If I couldn't stop her, maybe I could at least document her. Maybe then the HOA would take me seriously. Or maybe, just maybe, I'd catch something so egregious that the internet would take care of her for me. Because if there's one thing people online love, it's an entitled thief caught in 4K. 2 days later, I had the footage. Crystal clear. Karen creeping into my yard like a cartoon villain, dragging the hose away with the same smug grin she wore every day. And the cherry on top? She used it to water her plants, fill up a kiddie pool, and then wash her dog. All before I even woke up. It was a full Karen production, and I had every second recorded. I posted a clip to a local neighborhood forum under the title, "Neighbor Steals My Water Every Morning." The video exploded. People were outraged. Some laughed. Some offered advice. One guy even sent me a link to a motion-triggered sprinkler that would spray intruders. But the best part? Karen saw it. I knew she saw it because the next morning she knocked on my door. No sun hat. No smile. Just rage. She told me I was violating her privacy, threatening her reputation, and creating a hostile environment. I told her she was violating my property, stealing my water, and creating a financial burden. She huffed, crossed her arms, and said the dumbest thing I've ever heard, "Do something about it. I dare you." And that was the moment it all changed. That dare lit a fire in me I didn't even know I had. Because I was going to do something about it. Something she would never see coming. Something she would never forget. If Karen wanted water, oh, she was going to get it. The very next morning, I woke up with a different mindset. No more playing the nice neighbor. No more emails to the HOA. No more locks. Karen had issued a dare, and I was going to take it. I was going to do something she would regret every time she turned a faucet. But revenge needs planning, and I wasn't about to go in unprepared. First, I wanted to see how far she'd really go. Was she only using the hose when I wasn't home? Or was she bold enough to steal water under any circumstance? I took a day off work and stayed inside, blinds drawn, coffee in hand, just watching. Sure enough, around 10:30 in the morning, I heard the soft hiss of the spigot turning and the hose being dragged across my yard. I peeked through the blinds. There she was again, wearing yoga pants and a smug expression, spraying down her driveway like it was her personal car wash. This time, I walked outside, phone in hand, pretending to be texting. She saw me, hesitated for half a second, then carried on like I wasn't even there. I didn't say anything. Just recorded. She didn't flinch. It was like she wanted to prove that I couldn't stop her. That my complaints, my cameras, my warnings meant nothing. When she finished, she waved the hose at me and said, "See? Works great. You should thank me for keeping it in shape." I forced a smile, went back inside, and watched the video again. I didn't even have to zoom. The footage was clear, direct, and damning. But even so, I already knew the HOA wouldn't do anything. I had tried that road. It was time for a different kind of justice. That afternoon, I uploaded the new footage to a neighborhood Facebook group, this time with a snappier title. Local Karen turns neighbor's hose into personal water park. Within hours, the comments poured in. Everyone had a Karen story, but mine seemed to hit a nerve. People laughed, mocked her, suggested ridiculous punishments, and a few even offered legal advice. Some were furious that the HOA had done nothing. The video gained traction, being shared beyond the neighborhood group. It hit Reddit. It hit YouTube. Strangers from other states were tagging their friends. And Karen? Oh, she noticed. The following morning, she stood in her yard with 2 members of the HOA board, pointing at my house. I watched from the window as she acted like she was the victim. I saw her gesturing dramatically, even pretending to wipe a tear. A few hours later, I got a letter slipped into my mailbox. A formal warning from the HOA for unauthorized surveillance and hostile behavior toward a fellow resident. I almost laughed. Hostile behavior? I hadn't even raised my voice. They were more upset about me recording her theft than about the theft itself. So that was it. I was done playing by the rules. If the system wouldn't help me, I'd make my own system. I started brainstorming. I thought about alarms, fake signs, pranks, but none of them felt like enough. I wanted something poetic. Something that would leave an impression, not just a mess. That's when fate handed me the perfect opportunity. I was driving past a construction site on the edge of the neighborhood when I saw a crew setting up a temporary sewage tank. Not just a regular one either. This was industrial, the kind they use for portable toilets and waste containment. And it hit me. A terrible, brilliant, satisfying idea. I pulled over and struck up a conversation with one of the workers, asked a few casual questions, told him I was a homeowner dealing with some drainage problems and might need a similar tank for an irrigation experiment. He laughed, but he was friendly, and after a bit of back and forth, I slipped him a little cash to let me access the tank for a single evening, strictly for testing purposes. He agreed, shrugged, and said as long as I didn't mess with the pump, he didn't care what I did. That was all I needed. Back home, I pulled out my toolbox. I built a small adapter that connected the spigot to a second hose, one that I ran underground and behind some bushes, connected directly to the sewage tank. It was genius. The outward appearance of my hose was totally normal. But when someone turned it on, thinking they'd get clean, pressurized water, they'd be in for a surprise. A brown, smelly, unforgettable surprise. I tested it once to make sure it worked, using a separate line and a sealed bucket. The results were exactly what I'd hoped for. The smell alone could have knocked out a horse. Now all I had to do was wait. I set everything up one night under cover of darkness, made sure the cameras were rolling, and left the main hose where Karen always found it. The bait was perfect. The trap was armed. And just as I expected, the next morning around 10:30, I heard it. The familiar hiss of the hose. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the camera feed. There she was, dragging it across the yard like always. She didn't even look around this time. She was that confident, that entitled. She hooked the hose to a new rotating sprinkler, one of those fancy ones that spin in a wide circle, and set it down in the center of her lawn. Then she turned the spigot. It was slow at first. A weird gurgle. A sputter. She tilted her head, confused. Then it hit. A jet of thick, dark, putrid liquid shot out in a wide arc, spraying her lawn, her patio, and most importantly, her white wicker furniture. The sprinkler spun once. Twice. By the third rotation, she was screaming. Screaming so loud I could hear it through the walls. She ran toward the spigot, slipping on the grass as it turned into a smelly swamp. Neighbors started poking their heads out. Some gasped. One man dropped his coffee. Someone even started filming. Karen wrestled with the hose like it was a snake trying to kill her. She ripped it from the sprinkler, but not before another spray of sewage blasted her shins. She was covered, screaming, coughing, and best of all, there were witnesses. Real, live witnesses who had seen everything. I watched it all on the screen, savoring every second. This wasn't just revenge. This was art. Later that day, I walked outside pretending to check my mail. She saw me and lost it. Stormed over, still wearing ruined sandals and covered in sludge, shouting about lawsuits and biohazards and threat. I didn't say a word. I just smiled and said, "You told me to do something about it. So I did." Her face turned red, then green, then red again. She stomped off, yelling about calling the HOA. I waved and said, "Be sure to tell them the water wasn't stolen this time." That night, I uploaded the footage, and within hours it broke the internet. Karen was now officially famous, and not in a good way. By the next morning, my entire neighborhood had changed. People weren't just whispering anymore. They were outright laughing. From the moment Karen's sewage sprinkler show went online, her reputation took a nosedive so fast it could have cracked pavement. The video spread like wildfire, especially once someone edited in dramatic music and slow-motion zooms of her reaction. I hadn't posted the footage myself this time. Someone else did, probably one of the neighbors who caught it live. I could tell from the angle it was filmed from the upper balcony across the street. Within 12 hours, the clip had made it to Reddit, TikTok, and even Facebook mom groups with titles like "When Karens Get What They Deserve" and "Neighborhood Justice at its Finest." But as satisfying as the public reaction was, I wasn't done. See, the sewage stunt was just phase 1. It worked beautifully, no doubt, but Karen wasn't the type to learn from her mistakes. If anything, the mess had only triggered her deeper instincts for retaliation. I knew her silence wouldn't last. And I was right. That afternoon, a very official-looking envelope appeared at my door. Inside was a letter printed in all caps, filled with legal buzzwords and empty threat. She accused me of intentional sabotage, personal endangerment, and biological assault. She even claimed her dog got sick from the incident, though I had clear video of the animal nowhere near the spray zone. I almost felt bad for her lawyer if she actually hired one, because anyone who read the full story would have laughed her right out of the office. But I took the letter seriously in one way. It confirmed what I already knew. Karen wasn't going to stop. So I started planning phase 2. Not another prank. Something smarter, something permanent. The ultimate shutdown. First, I doubled down on my camera system. I added another 2 motion-sensing cams around the side of the house, and one right above the hose, hidden inside a fake birdhouse. I wanted a 360-degree view of everything, just in case she got clever. Then I visited the construction site again, just to thank the workers and discreetly offer them a pizza delivery on me. Keeping them happy meant keeping access to the sewage tank just a little longer. They thought I was testing fertilizer flows. I didn't correct them. At home, I upgraded the hose rig. The first version had been manually routed and required careful timing. This time, I added a remote switch inside my garage. It controlled a valve splitter that could switch between regular water flow and the sewage tank line. It was seamless, smooth, and hidden underground with a new cover of grass. It was overkill, but I wasn't taking chances. If Karen dared to use it again, she'd never know which kind of water she was getting. It was like Russian roulette, but with hoses. But then something happened I didn't expect. Karen vanished. Not entirely. She still lived across the street. But she didn't leave her house. For 2 days straight, her curtains stayed drawn, her car unmoved, her yard untouched. No hose theft. No yelling. No clipboard patrol. It was unsettling, like the calm before a hurricane. And sure enough, on day 3 it hit. A notice from the HOA arrived at my door. This one wasn't a warning. It was a fine. A real one. It stated I had violated community health protocols and intentionally created a hazardous environment for a fellow resident. The amount? $600. I stared at the paper in disbelief. I called the HOA office, demanded an explanation, and got passed around 3 different board members. Finally, someone admitted that Karen had filed a formal complaint backed by photographic evidence, and 2 supposed witnesses who claimed I had threatened her with a chemical attack. I couldn't even laugh. It was just too absurd. I offered to show them the full camera footage, timestamps, and even documentation from the construction site showing that the hose was accessed solely from my property. They said they'd review it in the next board meeting. That meeting, by the way, was scheduled for the following month. It was a setup. Karen knew exactly how the HOA worked. Slow, bureaucratic, and easily manipulated. She was using the system like her personal shield. But she made one mistake. She assumed I would let it go. That I'd either pay the fine or wait quietly for my name to be cleared. She didn't know that while she was hiding behind paperwork, I was already digging deeper. Over the next few days, I did some research. I combed through public records, dug up HOA bylaws, even visited the county clerk's office. It wasn't about obsession. It was about precision. And then I found it. A technicality buried in the association rules, Section 4.12b. Any homeowner caught trespassing on another resident's property without express permission, particularly for the use of utilities, will be subject to immediate investigation, fines, and potential removal from the HOA benefits. There it was. The golden ticket. Karen had walked onto my property countless times. I had video proof. I had timestamps. I had witnesses, unlike her imaginary ones. I printed it all out, stapled it into a thick packet, and mailed copies not only to the HOA but also to a few other residents who had complained about her in the past. I didn't start a war. I started a rebellion. Within 2 days, one of my neighbors knocked on my door. He was a soft-spoken guy named Glenn who lived 2 houses down. Said he'd had it with Karen ever since she reported his backyard hammock for being too colorful. He thanked me for exposing her. Then another neighbor joined in. Then another. Karen had made enemies everywhere. I had just lit the fuse. Soon, the entire street was buzzing. People were comparing stories, sharing notes, and passing around the footage like trading cards. I didn't have to lift another finger. Karen had spent months acting like the queen of the block, and now her kingdom was revolting. The final piece fell into place when someone leaked a recording of a private HOA meeting where Karen had tried to manipulate the board. Her voice was unmistakable, and her tone was as entitled as ever. It ended with her screaming about being targeted by jealous neighbors who can't handle a strong woman. That clip, paired with her sewage bath video, created a perfect storm. Karen came outside 2 days later, sunglasses on, no makeup, and visibly shaken. She didn't yell. She didn't steal water. She just got into her car and drove away without looking at anyone. For the first time in weeks, the street felt calm. Peaceful. Like it used to be before she arrived. But I wasn't foolish enough to think it was over. People like Karen don't disappear. They retreat, regroup, and plan their next move. That's why I left the remote valve switch active. That's why I kept the camera system on 24/7. If she ever decided to try me again, I'd be ready. Because this wasn't just about water anymore. This was about boundaries. And Karen had finally learned that mine came with consequences. 3 days passed in a kind of eerie silence. Karen's house sat still like it was under quarantine. No cars in the driveway, no patio music, no garden hose snaking across my lawn like a thief in the night. It almost felt too quiet, like a trap. I knew Karen well enough by now to understand she wasn't just licking her wounds and moving on. She was the kind of person who didn't back down, not because she was brave, but because she couldn't stand losing control. And after that sewage sprinkler incident, she had lost it all, her dignity, her spotless patio, and her reign as queen of the cul-de-sac. So when I heard the knock on my door just after noon, I didn't even flinch. I already knew it would be her. What I didn't expect was for her to bring backup. Standing beside her on my porch were 2 members of the HOA board, one of them holding a clipboard, the other a thick folder. Karen, dressed like she was attending a courtroom drama instead of confronting a neighbor, kept her arms folded, jaw tight, eyes laser-focused on mine like she was rehearsing a victory speech in her head. The clipboard guy cleared his throat and said they were there to discuss an escalating property dispute and potential biohazard incident. I asked if they'd like to come inside, but Karen snapped, saying she didn't feel safe entering my home. I laughed, not out loud, just inside, because I knew what this really was, her final attempt to paint herself as the victim. They handed me a formal complaint, 3 pages long, filled with exaggerated language. Karen claimed I had weaponized sewage, that I had created an environmental hazard, and that she was experiencing emotional distress from what she described as an orchestrated public humiliation campaign. She even claimed the stench had seeped into her home's foundation, which made me wonder if she even understood how plumbing worked. I let them speak, nodding occasionally, waiting for the real moment I was expecting. And it came. Karen demanded that I pay for the cleanup of her lawn and patio, formally apologize, and attend a conflict resolution session arranged by the HOA. The moment she finished her list of ridiculous demands, I held up a finger and said I had something to show them. I stepped inside, grabbed my printed folder of evidence, and brought it out. Everything was there. Time-stamped video footage of Karen entering my property without permission, multiple times, on multiple dates, always with my hose in hand. I included water bill statements, screenshots of neighborhood posts, even a list of other neighbors who had submitted complaints about her in the past year. And then I handed them the HOA bylaw she clearly violated, highlighted in neon yellow. Trespassing with use of private utilities without consent. Clipboard guy took his time reading. Karen's face went pale as he flipped the pages. The other board member leaned in, whispering something under his breath, and suddenly the mood shifted. Karen started interrupting, claiming the videos were manipulated, that I was stalking her, that I had created a hostile environment long before the hose incident. But they weren't buying it. The board members said they needed time to review all the material and would call a special meeting within the week to address the issue. Karen protested, said she deserved immediate action. But this time they ignored her. The moment they walked away, Karen turned to me one last time. Her voice was quieter now, sharper, almost trembling. She told me she would make sure everyone knew the kind of person I really was. I told her they already did. And with that, she stomped back to her house, muttering something I didn't care to decipher. That night, I posted a calm, fact-based summary of the events in the same neighborhood forum where the videos had first gone viral. I didn't add sarcasm or exaggeration. I just posted the truth. How she trespassed, how she used my water, how I tried to go through the HOA, how I protected my property when the system failed. The response was overwhelming. People rallied behind me, sharing their own Karen stories again. One neighbor even offered to mow my lawn for free just to thank me for standing up to her. Another left a fresh-baked pie at my doorstep with a sticky note that read, "You're a legend." 2 days later, the special HOA meeting took place. It wasn't public, but word spread fast. Karen showed up with printed documents and a folder of what she claimed were legal threats against her. But all of it crumbled under the weight of the evidence. The board reviewed my footage, reviewed the bylaws, and issued an official HOA warning to her. She was fined $500 for multiple trespassing violations and warned that any future incidents would result in suspension of her HOA privileges. They didn't apologize to me directly, but I could tell they were backpedaling from their earlier support of her. She had finally become a liability they could no longer protect. The best part? Her little fan club started to dissolve. The board member who used to back her silently resigned the next week. Karen, once the self-proclaimed neighborhood sheriff, now walked her dog with her head down, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Her driveway stayed dry. Her porch stayed dirty. And the hose? She never touched it again. But even then, it wasn't over. Karen tried one last pathetic move. She filed a complaint with the city, claiming I had illegally installed a sewage connection in my yard. I got a visit from a city inspector who, after checking the setup and laughing for 5 straight minutes, told me I was in the clear. The hose line wasn't permanent. There was no violation. He even said, off the record, that he wished more people handled things with such creativity. I offered him a bottle of water. He declined, joking, "Only if it's not from the hose." By now, my video had passed 4 million views online. People were asking for interviews. One guy emailed asking if I'd consider selling shirts with the phrase "Hose Justice" printed on them. My neighbors were treating me like a local hero, but I didn't feel heroic. I felt relieved. Finally, after weeks of madness, I had peace. And yet, part of me stayed alert. Because people like Karen don't disappear. They regroup. They wait. They try to find new ways to bite back. So I left the remote valve installed. I left the cameras on. I even set up a new hose, shiny and tempting, coiled like a trap waiting to spring. Not because I thought she'd try again, but because if she did, I wanted to be ready. Because now, everyone in the neighborhood knew one thing for sure. If Karen came for my hose again, she'd better bring a mop. It had been nearly a month since the sewage storm hit Karen's kingdom. Her house, once the epicenter of noise, complaints, and unsolicited advice, now stood like a forgotten monument to suburban tyranny. The porch lights stayed off at night, the curtains drawn tighter than ever, and not once did her shoes touch my lawn again. The hose lay coiled peacefully, untouched and gleaming under the sun like a retired warrior who had seen the battlefield and earned its rest. For the first time in what felt like forever, my mornings were quiet. No more spikes in the water bill, no more confrontation over a simple gardening tool, and no more being made to feel like a trespasser on my own property. Life had returned to normal, or at least something that resembled it. The neighbors greeted me with smiles now, not just casual nods but genuine acknowledgement. People who used to look the other way when Karen walked by now went out of their way to stop and chat with me. Glenn, the hammock guy, even invited me over for a backyard barbecue, and someone anonymously left a gold-colored hose nozzle on my doorstep as a trophy. No note, no name, just a silent salute from someone who understood poetic justice when they saw it. Online, the saga had taken on a life of its own. The video kept gaining traction. Memes were made. People stitched their own Karen stories onto mine. One guy even made a parody song using the footage of the sewage spray in slow motion, synced to dramatic opera music. Someone else created a graphic novel-style animation, retelling the event with exaggerated cartoon versions of Karen and me. Every few days, I'd get another message from a stranger somewhere in the world saying thank you for standing up to HOA madness or sharing how my story inspired them to finally call out their own neighborhood tyrant. I didn't ask for the fame, but I wasn't going to lie, it felt good. Still, I never fully let my guard down. Karen had gone quiet, but quiet didn't mean defeated. It meant waiting. One evening, just after sunset, I found an envelope slipped under my front door. There was no postage, no name, just a single sheet of paper folded neatly. Inside was a handwritten note that read, "You may have won this time, but this neighborhood won't be yours forever. I'll be back stronger." The handwriting was unmistakable. It was the same angry cursive I'd seen on every HOA complaint form she ever submitted. I laughed, not because I found it funny, but because it was exactly the kind of thing she'd do. Dramatic, vague, and completely ineffective. The next day, a moving truck appeared in front of her house. No warning. No goodbye. Just workers packing up her potted plants, her outdoor furniture, and that god-awful pink flamingo she used to keep by the mailbox. She didn't say a word to anyone. She simply vanished. Her house was listed for sale by the end of the week, and within days, a young couple with a toddler bought it and moved in. They introduced themselves the very first day, brought cookies, and asked politely if it was okay to use their own hose hookup. I nearly cried from the normalcy. But the story didn't end there. A week later, I got an email from a guy named Devin. He lived in another HOA across town and had somehow ended up with Karen as his new neighbor. Apparently, she wasted no time settling into her old habit. First it was complaints about someone's wind chimes being too loud, then about a cat that dared to walk across her front steps, and finally, wait for it, she was seen dragging a neighbor's hose across the yard to wash her car. Devin found me through the viral video and asked if I had any tips on how to handle her. I told him everything. I sent him the setup plans for the valve system, recommended the camera brands I used, and even included a document I'd made called Karen Defense Protocol. He replied with 3 words, "This means war." I didn't hear back for a few days, but when I did, it was glorious. Devin had taken my idea and gone even further. Instead of sewage, he used a mixture of compost tea and expired fertilizer, completely natural but outrageously foul. Karen got sprayed again, only this time it was in front of a group of kids playing on their scooters. The footage wasn't as clean as mine, but it was hilarious. She screamed, slipped, and fell into her rose bushes. The video went up online, and within 48 hours, people were calling it Karen's Revenge Part 2. The saga continued, and I realized something both amusing and slightly disturbing. Karen wasn't just a problem. She was a traveling circus of entitlement, infecting every HOA she touched. But now, thanks to the internet, every time she struck, someone was ready to strike back. After that, I decided to make something useful out of the experience. I started a small blog where I wrote about ridiculous HOA encounters, neighborhood drama, and suburban pettiness. I didn't name anyone directly, but everyone knew who the Hose Queen was. I turned the camera footage into a little miniseries, pairing it with anonymous stories submitted by others. It grew faster than I expected. People were tired of being pushed around in their own homes, and somehow, my ridiculous water war had become the banner they could rally behind. I even started selling a few t-shirts with funny slogans like Hose Before Bros and Justice Flows. But despite all that, my favorite part of the whole ordeal wasn't the views or the messages or even the satisfaction of watching Karen slip into her own puddle of karma. It was something quieter. One afternoon, I was in my backyard, just trimming the hedges, when I heard laughter. Real, loud, unfiltered laughter. It was the new couple who moved into Karen's old house, chasing their toddler around a sprinkler they'd set up on their own lawn using their own hose. The kids squealed with delight, the parents laughed along, and no one was stealing water or writing fines. That was the real win. Not the revenge. Not the views. But the peace. The return to a neighborhood where people respected each other's space, where the only thing spraying from a hose was water, not war. As I stood there, hose in hand, I thought about all the chaos that one simple garden tool had caused. Who would have thought that a plastic tube and some water pressure could unravel an entire power structure, expose a tyrant, and unite a street full of strangers? It was ridiculous. It was poetic. And it was perfect. I turned the spigot, let the hose come to life, and watered my tomato plant like I used to. Peacefully, quietly, and without an audience. And for the first time in a long time, it actually felt like home again,